Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Please make sure you take the opportunity to share what's going on here live on YouTube and on Facebook. We are here co-convening with the Transformative Justice Coalition on the John Lewis National Day of Action. We want to bring awareness to the impact of voting, voter suppression, the passing of the For the People Act, and also the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. We need to make sure everybody is aware, and we put a little bit more pressure on that Senate to pass these acts. And also, we just want to encourage all of you to pay attention to what's going on in the community. We know here that we have an election coming up on May 18th. So make sure you tune in and you exercise your right to vote. I am excited for the panelists that we have this afternoon. We have moderating the panel, Pastor Robert Shipman. He is the pastor of the Prince of Peace Baptist Church in North Philadelphia. He is going to take our experts, our panelists, on this ride conversationally, I'm sure. So make sure, again, you share and like and comment. We want to hear from you. I see Pastor Elvis Turner already on here. What's up, Pastor Turner? Good to see you on. Please make sure you are sharing this with your family and friends. Right now, we have Minister Rodney Muhammad and Miss Tiffany Dominique on with us, and Pastor Shipman is going to have them go through their introductions as well. Again, make sure you like, you share, you comment. We want to know who you are and where you're tuning in from. And as you raise questions or make comments, we're going to make sure our panelists see them and that they make comments there. All right. So without any further ado, I am going to bring in Pastor Shipman. Let me see if I can do this right. Well, I'm bringing everybody in. So, hey, Pastor Shipman, how are you?
Good evening. I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Yes, well, the floor is yours. I'm going to put you on the center of the screen and remove myself.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, Antoinette. Good to see you, sis.
Blessings to you all, and thank you for tuning in with us. And I know that an hour is such a short period of time for us to be dealing with such heavy subjects, but we needed to find a way to get this in and get some community input. And I'm glad to have with us Sister Tiffany and Minister Muhammad to begin our conversation off today. We just concluded a press conference with regard to the activity of some in our government and non-government to do as much as they can to suppress the people and the votes of the people that they supposedly represent. I do want to say, and you all, I hope you don't mind me saying this from a Christian perspective, for those Christians who still kind of have questions as to whether the church ought to be involved in political issues or not. Let me tell you something. From the time you open up your discussions in Genesis chapters 11 and 12 about the patriarch Abraham, almost every particular prophet or preacher addresses the social and moral issues that of their day. We are no different, and we are to call out and speak to power when they are wrong. And we are fortunate that in our day we have people like Sister Tiffany Dominique and Minister Rodney Muhammad to speak along with us and often for us on these issues. And so let me first give about 60 seconds for each of these wonderful persons to introduce themselves, and we're going to get to the subjects of what voter suppression is and how it impacts us and all that kind of stuff. But just tell us about yourself and how you began engaging in this and how long you've been in the fight. Sister Tiffany, do you mind if we start with you?
That's great. Thank you for having me. My name is Tiffany Dominique, and I am the co-convener of the Philadelphia Black Women's Roundtable. Black Women's Roundtable is an intergenerational organization that is part of the National Coalition of Black Civic Participation. It's really designed to galvanize women and girls around civic engagement and things that are important to us. And we know that without our voice and our vote, the needle is not going to move. And we want to be a part of that needle being pushed.
Amen. Would you give me the name of the organizations, that organization one more time?
We are part of the Philadelphia Black Women's Roundtable, and that is a program of the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Glad to have you here. Looking forward to everything that you have to say. Minister Muhammad, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, Minister Rodney Muhammad. I'm currently president of the Philadelphia chapter of the NAACP. Of course, I've been a minister in the city for a number of years here in the city of Philadelphia and throughout the Delaware Valley. I minister over mosque number 12 and actually several mosques over Delaware, all of southern Jersey, and all of the state of Pennsylvania. You know, interestingly enough, my faith journey as a child, 10 and 11 years old, I spent some time on the farm with my grandmother there. We started in the church. I was actually baptized after sitting on the morning bench for nearly a week.
Wow.
I was baptized in a creek. You didn't make appointments in those days. You had to wait on the Spirit to tell you when it was time for it. So, you know, it sort of followed me all along. In Chicago on the South Side, of course, I was there at Breadbasket with Reverend Jackson when he first started Operation Push. I later met Minister Farrakhan in working on the South Side, and I've been with him for the last 40 years. But we still work with all organizations, Push, National Action Network, and everyone. And I've been here in the city of Philadelphia. And by 2014, they asked me if I would run for president of the NAACP to help it through some troubling times. And so we've been blessed to do what we went to the NAACP to do organizationally and with our national board. And so I'm probably in my last term as president, but I'll still be working in the community.
All right.
Yes,
thank you to both of you. Thank you for your labor on behalf of our community and for so many of us who kind of were like late to the party, so to speak. Thank you for being there and for holding the door open for us to kind of latch on and get involved. We want to talk about this issue of voter suppression a little bit. So can you, in some simple terms, give us an idea, not necessarily how it impacts us yet, we'll talk about the impact, but how would you define voter suppression for us, for us, for our listening audience?
Well, I guess there are a lot of ways that it could be. I always feel like history is the best teacher. I start from 1865 after the Civil War, of course, and 1 year later with the Civil Rights Act of 1866. But from 1866 to 1876, you know, Black folks were voting. It was not women, just men. But with that, coming out of slavery, with 98% of us said to be illiterate, we put 664 people into office in those years. 15 of them were in Congress, 2 in the Senate. By 1951, measures were set up in the South where we almost didn't have no one in government. It looked like we had never voted almost. And it was like in 1951, we started all over. And of course, the NAACP had its first martyr in 1951. They killed our state president and his wife over Florida, Harry T. Moore and his wife, Harriet. They blew him up in their home, trying to register people to vote in Florida. Of course, Thurgood Marshall worked for 20 years. And then by 1955, the Supreme Court decision with Brown versus Board of Kansas, well, that lit the South on fire. And one of the things that it did was it reignited some kind of fight toward the machinery that was put together down in the South during Jim Crow, denying, even though we constitutionally had the right to vote, that Constitution was not specific enough to prohibit many of these local municipalities from employing measures that would keep us from voting, which was a form of voter suppression. How many bubbles in a bar of soap? Can you read this? And if you couldn't read that, and most of us were illiterate, you weren't allowed to vote. They found all kind of measures, and by 1963, Medgar Evers decided, he was over the NAACP field operations in Mississippi. He decided we're gonna boycott these stores in downtown Jackson, Mississippi. And that, people to this day say, well, he got killed for registering people to vote. He got killed because he put some of them folks out of business. When Black folks withheld their dollars in downtown Jackson, Mississippi, the businesses weren't as sophisticated as they are today with mergers and acquisitions. You had a store, it was your family store, it was in their name. If Black folks didn't shop in it, you just went out of business. And they were furious at this campaign. By 1965, of course, we got the Voting Rights Act passed under President Johnson. I forget the year, but somewhere in this 21st century, the Supreme Court decided to take out of the voting rights bill one of its most potent components, and it's allowing these local municipalities to come up with all kind of imagination in ways to make it far more difficult for us to be able to vote, whether it's voter ID questions or the number of locations that we would have to be able to vote. All of it serves to reduce the number of votes that we have. And, and I'll just close out with this. As a Black man living in North America, in these United States of America, our history shows, and there are a lot of things we could do for ourselves, but our history shows there were two things that was immoral and they made legal, and that was you didn't have the right to read and write, and you didn't have the right to vote. So as a Black man, I'm saying, if I don't do nothing else with this lifetime, one thing I'm gonna do is learn how to read, and I'm gonna vote.
Thank you. Listen, thank you for that tremendous historical lesson, which kind of frames and shapes the rest of what we're going to be talking about for the day. That was rich. We really appreciate that. Brother Abu Edwards is on with us now. Hey, man, it's good to see you again. Didn't get a chance to shake hands with you and say how awesome you were down at the church, but we appreciated your words, and I'm looking forward to hearing about your work. At this point, we gave the other two participating guests the opportunity to share something about themselves, how they got involved with this work. Would you like to do that?
Yeah, so I appreciate to be on this graceful stage with all you heroes and community activists. My name is Abu Edwards, born and raised in the city of Philadelphia. I tell people all the time, what made you care about your community? It was two things. I was a safety in elementary school. I was and I was in student government at a young age. Every young Black boy don't walk around with a basketball.
Right.
And my basketball was caring about people at a young age. And that's what really ignited, my passion for civic engagement and just representing and speaking up for people, man. I used to go in my neighborhood and see, folks my age during that time, 10, 11 years old, beating up poor people, homeless people, beating up bus drivers during that time when they were like running on the bus and taking their SEPTA passes. And I just, I saw a lot. I saw that in my age bracket at a young age, but also it was just something in me that one day that my age group would be the forefront, of democracy, in the forefront and leading the, and being handed down the torch to carry, for democracy. I've graduated from a historically Black college, Wilberforce University, the first Black private institution of higher education. And that taught me a lot. It taught me, to be the change you want to see in your community. Just don't sit back and complain, but be the change. If you don't see an organization you want to join, create your own organization. If you feel like elected officials ain't doing their job, then run for office. If you feel like teachers ain't teaching your kids, then become a teacher. If you feel like police officers are doing the wrong thing, then become a police officer. Because we have to start putting ourselves in those shoes to make sure that we have the, the resources and the integrity in our community, man.
Amen. I had to say it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Tell us a little bit about how voter suppression affects the possible progress of social improvement and political empowerment in our community. Abu, would you be the first to speak to that?
Yeah, we've seen in history, during the civil rights movement, during the March Across Selma, that it was young people during that time, young and older people, who fought and who died and who got power holes, to vote, to march to the voter registration office to request a voter registration card. And I tell young people, and I tell people all the time, if your vote didn't matter, then why did so many people die for it?
Mm.
Why did so many people, risk their whole entire lives, and their families to make sure that, this is what they were doing to protect their families? And I think that, when we took civics out of school, I think that we lost that component where young people can matriculate and understand the importance of voting and how voting, how voting empowers resources in the community. I think that portion has stopped because everything that we're dealing with when it comes to voter suppression, when it comes to murder, when it comes to lack of education, when it comes to gun prevention, when it comes to renting versus owning, when it comes to land use, all that impacts, us as Black and brown people in these communities. But what's going to change, if we don't do anything, is our vote.
Yes.
We vote, when we increase our vote as Black and brown people, like I said earlier, we increase political accountability.
Yes.
We increase awareness to our people. I know some people been in, casinos and, things of that nature. Look who they cater to, right?
Mm-hmm.
We understand that, like, look who they cater to, right? Because they feel that they have the money for that particular, right? If Black, brown people got together, if young people understood the importance of, I can actually make a difference, then we will literally see a shift, in the next years. But it's going to take organizations, like Millennials in Actions, like the NAACP, like, other historic organizations, the churches who've been at the forefront, all of our lives, who've been the safe havens for, for us, who've been the forefront, to fight for, to make sure that, the vote ID, and to make sure that people, can vote, to make sure that polling locations are not changed 7 days before there's election day. And I think that's important with this whole Congressman Lewis, is to make sure that he saw the vision. He saw what needed to happen right at this moment to make sure that democracy in the country is well protected. He understands that, young people or even people of color who may have been, torn down by, the systems and all that, they still have the opportunity and the pathway to vote when they deem necessary.
Mm-hmm. Tiffany, can I throw this? Thank you, Abu. Tiffany, can I throw this next thing by you? It's just occurs to me. Are there ways that the lack of participation in the voting process, do you think that there are ways that that has impacted the lives, particularly of millennials, of Xers, maybe even of late baby boomers? Can you think of some ways that maybe we've been impacted by lack of voting?
When I think about the power of the vote, I mean, the lie is that your vote doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
That's the lie. Your vote clearly matters because that's how the folks that vote are that's the squeaky wheel that the politician and the legislator listens to. Mm-hmm. And so if you're not voting, then that millennial, that Gen Xer is now not having an opportunity to say, this is the issue that is most important to me. When I hear all this stuff about college debt and college loans, that's certainly something that a Gen Xer and a millennial is feeling, and the Gen Zs are going to feel. So knowing that you can impact how a politician sees whether or not they're going to have community college for free, that's an impact. Uh-huh. When we think about what kind of dollars are going into the school system, and some states, they fund their schools by taxes. Some uh-huh. states don't. But that even those decisions are made by the voter, by saying, this is a person I'm going to elect to come in. When we think about what happened last year, last June, last August, with all of the racial unrest that happened in this country, we then saw in November just how those people saying this is an important issue, how that changed the ballot question, two ballot questions on the November election in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see that if you show up, your voice gets heard. If you then go to the poll, your voice gets heard. It now gives you the entrance into the office to say, hey, call them up, show up at their office, email them, put on Twitter, blast, whatever, to say, this is the issue that's important to me, and what are you going to do to address it?
Thank you. Listen, I one of the things that one of the strengths that I used to see in our community that it is may not be as readily apparent as it used to be is that there was a point at which generationally we felt linked. For a while there was this dogma going on about I forget the name of it now, but generation gap. For a while, that was language that was being used, but was not really applied so much to the Black community, but we bought into it. And what I see happening with all of you together today is that there is, I felt good because it's an intergenerational effort that's going on. Again, we are operating at this point as though we need each other like we do. This is not just about baby boomers, late or early. This is not just about Gen Xers or millennials or Gen Zers or ears, as they're calling some now. This is about all of us. And in the Black community, it makes sense that we would cross the bridges that have been artificially built to separate us, to keep us only concerned with ourselves rather than the entire community. In that connection, Minister Muhammad, can you give us maybe a short stint on how on the things that you think the things that we may have lost over the years because we have not participated in voting?
I think there have been some things lost, but I like what Tiffany was talking about. I think I have her name right, Dominique. With and of course though this has been a scourge on humanity globally and certainly in this country with the COVID-19, the one thing that COVID-19 did, it snatched all of us in a way that the many distractions that we have today, then we can attribute a lot of that to technology. Folks can't sit 30 minutes without looking at the cell phone and going through some of everything and maybe posting something again. Some folks posting themselves. So when you talk about the spirit of individuality, it's sort of overcome us and made us want to operate as individuals rather than as a group. But this George Floyd thing could have got past us with the distractions that were out there, but because of COVID-19 and we were shut in a lot, it had a lot of us paying attention to this and able to respond. Now, what got us in 1968 was the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. It snatched everybody's attention, and I was alive during that time. And organizations that normally weren't on the same side of the fence or the aisle in terms of method or how to go about freedom. You had the civil rights movement, you had the Black Power movement, you had all kind of groups, but everybody was in agreement that Dr. King didn't deserve to die that way. And what they did, they went into a study, they tried to find a leader who had ordered Black folks to riot in almost 100 and about 100 cities in America went up in smoke. But they found out there was no leader that told people to go out there. This was the rage that came out. And like a social nerve, if a brick hits my little toe, my whole body is made to know it.
Yeah, it resonates.
The nervous system makes all the body to know what's happening with any part of the body at any time. That social nerve hit us when Dr. King died, and everybody felt it at the same time. Mm-hmm. We all got hit. And so we did not see that kind of connection again until this moment with George Floyd. It did something, and no one called people and told people in St. Louis to march, and then Philly to march, and then this city, and how many days they were going to do it. It was almost spiritual, but it was a connection there. Mm-hmm. And people got up and started moving. And like Dominique said, it forced something political. You know, Dr. King used to say he wasn't a political force. He was preaching a soul force that would impose itself on the political world.
Absolutely.
To make change. And so a lot of our disconnect with that younger generation, I think we turn toward the political world as if it was the force, but they're the kind of force that sticks their finger in the air to see which way the wind is blowing. You know, that's the way politics goes. So whichever we go, so goes the political world. And we showed that in this moment with George Floyd other than any other time. And I think what happened to young people when they couldn't find the kind of leadership that they had coming through the 60s, going into the 70s and early 80s, there was a shift toward entertainment. We never expected Smokey Robinson and the Temptations and the Supremes to lead the movement. Mm-hmm. But you start having voices coming out of what we call the world of entertainment, and that began to be what a lot of young people were listening to more than anyone else. Mm-hmm. And so that by us not understanding rap or hip hop or that coming up, that genre coming up, it helped forge the disconnect that would take place. And so you had lesser people going to the church, you had lesser people going to houses of worship. There were all kind of disconnects, but I saw a real connection when George Floyd died the way he died before the world.
Yeah. You know, it's sometimes unfortunately, sometimes it takes a tragedy for us to really galvanize. Let me ask you guys. I know Tiffany and Abu have been out there, you've seen a lot of stuff. What are some of the forms of voter suppression that you've observed in your work?
I think the most obvious form of voter suppression that people don't realize and they experience it is the line. It's just the line that you have to wait in. You know, that it is truly a tactic to have lower numbers of people working the polls, fewer machines in certain districts, and that creates the line. And if I'm in line for that amount of time, I get frustrated and I leave. That's the tactic that's being used. That is probably one of the most obvious tactics that happens on election day. Mm-hmm. But it's the changing of the location. Abu talked about it. Like all of a sudden, you're getting notified 7 days before the election. Yeah. There's a change in where you're supposed to vote, where the polling location is. Now we're seeing legislation that is saying, luckily not in Pennsylvania, but around the country, where you can't give somebody water while standing in the line. Mm-hmm. That's going to be against the law. If they're changing the dates that you come, like now certain states won't allow you to vote on a Sunday, but it's only in certain areas. The fact that there's even in Pennsylvania, there is a push for voter ID, and that in itself can be problematic for people in order to vote. So those are clear signs of voter suppression.
Okay, Abu, you want to hit that a little bit?
I think she hit it like on the dot, but there's one major component that I see with voter suppression, especially during our ballot season, where we hit COVID, and a lot of people may not be registered at their address. They may be registered at their mom's address and live at another address.
Yes.
And when they sign a petition of a candidate of their choice, their signature gets knocked off the ballot because they're registered at that particular address. But but when we, like I said, the importance of voting, because we have to make voting work for us. When we understand that majority of our young people are living with their mom, or their mom address is the main base of their survival, then we have to create legislation to make that possible, so that we won't be getting kicked off the ballot, so that our signatures and our votes do matter. So that's thing that I see on a, I've seen for a few years happening.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Wow. Did you want to add anything to that, Minister?
Well, I'm just saying that, during this last election, the NAACP State Conference, Pennsylvania, did file a lawsuit after the primary in 2020 because it was felt that the change in dates and some of the measures that too many Republicans down in the General Assembly were trying to employ, they were trying to restrict us in Pennsylvania because obviously it was a battleground state, just a very wild period with the former president that we had, and he was literally just sending people out like the syndicate sends out hitmen, like go hit Pennsylvania and do things. We had to work close with the district attorney's office to make sure we were armed with attorneys that could help troubleshoot. We were trying to take them to court with a number of other things that we were already in court with the Trump administration about. But no, I agree with them. I think the most obvious thing is the line. I remember in college taking a management course, and there was this whole thing about the line theory that a person could literally have a full cart of groceries that might have taken them 45 minutes to select, going all around the store, and could be in a line and just get so exasperated with the line being so doggone long. People have been known to walk off and leave all the groceries that they picked out right there in that cart and just leave the store because of the very line that they're in. It can really challenge people. And, I read a saying once that said it takes 90 gallons of water to baptize you in the church, and it only take 9 drops of water to keep you from going to church. So,
wow.
There'll be things that you'll be surprised what people, the resistance, the threshold for people just caving in and saying, look, I've had it.
Let me ask you guys this here. I'm gonna combine something here. How is fear being used to suppress our votes? And what are some of the ways that communities are fighting against voter suppression?
Wow, I know in Georgia, that it's ridiculous what they got hit with. So there has to be pushback. I think you should understand your demographics. I don't think you should take your demographics for granted if you haven't really looked at it in the last decade. And I think that's where a lot of those extremists in the white community in Georgia have their head in the sand. They haven't been paying attention to the demographics. A lot of people have moved to Georgia. The population profile for Georgia has changed just like it's changing in America. And not realizing the Asian community built up there, the Latino community built up there. And there was Stacey Abrams. She was aware of all this. She's been building that mighty coalition for some time. And I think you can't go at this thing solo when you're going to fight this. You have to show people, first of all, that they have a vested interest in voting, but there's a big threat and detriment for not voting and coming together and finding a way to work together in some coalition form, even if it's temporary, to get that kind of massive vote out, which is what Georgia did to turn it to a blue state.
Let me ask Siobhan, do we have persons who are asking questions online?
Yes, we do. Donna Frisbee Greenwood asked a really good question.
Yeah.
How do we keep PA from coming Georgia, Texas, and other states that are now enacting voter suppression laws?
So I wanted to respond to Minister Muhammad as well. One of the things that, when you asked about what impact does fear have, at some level, we don't know, because fear tactics are being targeted. To his point about demographics, fear tactics are being targeted through people's Facebook pages, through their Twitter ads. And so if I'm not your friend, I don't necessarily know what fear mongering is happening over there. So there's some stuff that you will know, but there's a lot of stuff that we really don't even know the level of impact that people are doing to create fear, to either galvanize some folks to go to the polls or to use to get them to not go to the polls.
Tiffany, on that point, in your opinion, since the franchise, since voting is pretty much an inherent right of the American citizen, in your opinion, do you think the federal government should be more responsible in providing protections itself for both the people and the process?
Oh, I definitely do. But I think that, we have a system that has a division of federal government and state government and gives states rights. And that is why you have so many different attacks that are happening at voter suppression. So you're having to address voter suppression at the federal level, but then you have to go state by state to address these issues. And to Donna's point about how we get Pennsylvania not to be a Georgia or a Texas, there is a House Bill 470 that is really trying to do that. It's trying to shorten the deadline for voter registration as election day comes up. It's trying to shorten the application deadline for mail-in ballots from to going to 7 days versus 21 days that you have. It's trying to limit the number of drop-off boxes that you have in a community. And so all of those things are happening. So we as an electorate need to know that this House bill exists. We need to know that PA Senate Bill 422 and House Bill 853, which is around voter ID, exists. And then call our legislators, write our legislators, put op-eds and no, I don't agree with this. Talk to our neighbors and let them know that this is what's happening. And that they need to call. And elections are very localized. And it's because there are local issues. But when it comes to that, people think, oh, that happens at the federal level and I don't need to address it. No, you have to address it at the city, state, and federal level.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
So we need to be a bit more conscious about every level of voting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And which may mean to persons like me and other religious leaders as well as other civic leaders is that we may need to develop some sort of ongoing educational program. Abu mentioned earlier, and I 100% agree with this, when they took civics out of school. That was
yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So we may need to do, if we can get to
political action, I think.
We may need to strategize as to how we are going to contribute to the education, the ongoing education about participation and issues in the voting system at the local, state, and federal levels. Abu, I thought maybe you want to say something about that issue also.
Yeah, I think that, one of the most important tools that we can use is education. I think that we need a 365 education approach to making sure that people are aware that there's, elections every 6 months, who's running local, state, and federal, and having, our organizations and our partners step up to create and work with the schools to create that civic engagement, information that's needed. Because I think, if we can go to those 16-year-olds who's paying, who's getting the summer jobs, who understands of paying and taxation, that's the best example of cultivating them and getting them ready to prepare and to vote when they turn 18 years old. That's what we have to do if we really want, to change the demographics, to change to expand, voting. There's a couple organizations, and we're actually going to be working with Commissioner Sabir, where we're trying to get an organization or something where Black men vote 365 days.
Wow. Yeah.
And that is very crucial. Being, serving as the director of Black male engagement for the Biden campaign and overseeing that department, I tell people all the time, folks say your millennials don't vote. Listen, it's Black men are harder to get millennials to vote. Black men. Every time I'm on the street, I'm welcomed by my Black women all the time. I go to my Black brother, he's like, listen, man, I ain't about that life. And it's just literally having the opportunity, and the time to really take that 5, 10, or 15 minutes, just like Senator Vincent, you said earlier, to pull that brother to the side. But we we have to take that as other Black men, because we need that time. Our brothers need the time to understand what voting is and how it's impactful, because we've been traumatized too much. And just like, you know, the Rev said, you know, we're going through a shift. Back in the day, you know, our leaders used to be Dr. King and Malcolm X. Now it's Meek Mills and, you know, and other celebrities. And I mean, that's okay. But we have to hold them to a higher accountability as well. You know what I mean? Because this is a life-changing, you know, a life-changing wage. So if we could really, you know, increase our efforts and really educating folks 300, especially Black and brown people, 365 days around, I think we'll see our money well spent.
Hey, listen, I'm thinking in my head, I'm got like us going 100 miles an hour. We may need to do some symposium amongst activists about that very thing. We may need to focus on that. We may not, because the schools aren't absolutely in our hands, but we do have a little bit more that we can do in our community. We may need to talk about what that educational process looks like and how we do equip Black men and address that issue. I ain't about that life.
Yeah, that is something.
We need to target that and find how we can help them to how we can help our men to come to a different conclusion. Because the truth is, if you ain't about this life in America, understanding the power of the vote, then you are just by default in favor of your own death.
But you have to know sometimes how the things are constructed, because one of the NAACP's voices for years in this city was C. Dolores Tucker. C. Dolores Tucker took up a fierce campaign against the misogyny and the demeaning lyrics of many of the rap songs, as it was turning from what it originated from. Because rap didn't originate that way. But she initially, in her campaign, she was locking horns with the actual artists. And then she began to see that these artists weren't as guilty as she saw them to be, but that these guys sitting up in these corporate suites were playing a big role in shaping this thing. And so she turned her guns before she died toward those in those corporate offices and what they were doing with rap music. And so I was saying all that to say too, that as we go into dealing with politics, we have to understand what's being done and some of the forces that are behind politics today. To ignore that is to just say you're confirming why some people say I'm not into that no more, because sometimes they don't see us dealing with it as effectively as they know we should be. Deep inside, they may be on the streets, and then I've been on the streets, and I know how I felt from one end or the other on the south side of Chicago. But we've got to find a way to get them involved, but they don't want to get involved in the same old stuff. You know, you got to show them something else to get involved with if you're going to bring them on board. And I was just going to say, in the NAACP meetings, you know, we have a political action committee, and part of that committee's job is to stay on top of bills. Bills that are coming up that can be harmful to us in any kind of way, whether it's voting rights, housing, or education, or anything else. And so, you know, we generally find out about certain bills and decide whether we're going to file a lawsuit or something to do something to either keep it from coming into law or to see what we can do to find political partners to help us get it amended, watered down, made ineffective, or get rid of it altogether. But I agree with Abu. You know, it's a 365-day job.
Absolutely. Your
oppression, 365 days. You don't get a break from being oppressed. You know, in some form or another. Yeah.
Donna Frisbee Greenwood in the chat talked about Sharp Insight, which is a program where barbers are educating their customers about civic engagement and political engagement. And I think that kind of goes to Abu's point, because it's reshaping who the leaders are, who those trusted voices are, and giving people an opportunity to talk about civic engagement, talking about voting, but also other forms of what civic engagement looks like in communities, and you're hearing it from Black men talking primarily to other Black men.
I agree. I think, and you know what? That's not new. That's the way the barbershop used to be.
Always.
It used to be the university of the Black community.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you just sat in there, you got an education from men who had been all over the world, whether it was the Korean War, World War II, been in business, lived in the South, moved north. You learned about life all over the planet just sitting in the barbershop, and it's a good place to do it. There was a group of Black men who were doctors, and they set up a little clinic in the back of a barbershop, and that's how a lot of that got started. And then when they talked to men about getting tested for prostate cancer or AIDS or anything like that, if they could talk someone into doing something, they saw someone right in the back. And even Ice Cube put that in one of his barbershop movies called, I think, Fresh Cut or something. They had a guy in there. He did every kind of business but cut hair. And said, so barbershop becomes a one-stop thing. I agree with her.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to run out of time probably here in a couple of minutes, but I do want to take a minute to say, if you are looking for, or if you know of persons who are looking for information on what voter suppression looks like in the variety of our communities, Attorney Barbara Arnwine has placed online a list of 61 forms of voter suppression. I have the list. It would take too long to read it. I'm trying to think, what was the website that I went on to get it? Oh yeah, it's on the website of the Voter Rights Alliance.org. voterrightsalliance.org. 61 forms of voter suppression. This next piece that I'm going to ask you guys to address is probably going to be the last time I get a chance to say very much. But I'm going to ask you, if we should lose some of the fights over voter suppression, what is it that can be done to overcome its impact on our community and on our future?
So I'm not claiming that we're losing.
Yeah, no, I'm
let's start with that.
I'm with you. But truth be told, it's like, I look at it like this here. It's like folks who say I'm never going to get sick.
Yeah.
They never prepare. And when they do, they're not ready. So from that standpoint, go ahead.
I think that, unfortunately, there are times that we work in silos. And so I think that one is about building coalition and that we tag people in, because it is 365 days. And I think that it's designed to be that way to tire you out. So sometimes you need to tag somebody in. So I think it's about coalition building, but it's also knowing that on that day that if it passes, that you still got to go to work to fight it and to break it down. I think the tactics we should do is to really try and get as many of these things knocked down as possible, and try to make those fights happen around August or September, because it's make it that much harder for them to go in the November election to get it passed once the legislative sessions will be on break.
And Tiffany, you mentioned the long line and the patience that's required to do voting. Can you speak to what might be done in the event that we do have some? I mean, Florida is just a disaster with the stuff that they passed.
Yeah.
How can we help our voters in that kind of hostile environment, or can we?
I think one of the things that happened specifically around COVID is that we see a lot of poll workers, and historically have been older folks. And so getting younger people to be poll workers, to be poll monitors, to be folks that will encourage folks to stay in the line should be there. And also just the education for the voter to know that if you're in the line and the polls have air quote closed, as long as you're in the line, you have the right to vote. And so the key is that they stay in the line for if we long lines. But from our aspect, I think we need to be fighting for more polling machines and more poll workers to make sure that the line is shorter.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Great. I think we lost Abu.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. But, I think too, as we bring people on for this fight, Reverend Shipman, let's just be upfront with them. It is not going to be easy. Don't make them think it's going to be easy. And as soon as they find it's a difficulty, say, well, they didn't tell me about this. This is uphill. And we need to make that a point up front. And then I just think that the coalition widens the circle so you can get more information in. Some people, well, I don't want to work with this one and that, but I don't know everything. But I know if there's more people at the table, I'm going to hear ideas, because all that's going to come out of my mouth is what I already know. But what's going to come in my ear is probably something I didn't know. Yeah. And I can hear that from someone else if I'm willing to listen. And that tent is widened when you have a coalition going after an effort. The March on 1963 was a coalition effort. Dr. King said, I can speak and fire people up, but I don't know how to put on a march of that scale. It took an older man, A. Philip Randolph, to do that. The Million Man March, Minister Farrakhan said, look, I can call them, but I need people to help me organize this. So it was people from the church, from the mosque, from the streets, from other organizations and everything. We always win when we come together on a coalition basis, at least for a project that we know is going to benefit us all.
Yeah. Hey, listen, let me say thanks so much. I wish we had more time for this. And
yes, sir.
I wish we could do this more often and provide for our community a forum. And maybe in the future we can do something where we can actually even pull people in off the streets and get them into some listening and discussion sessions. But I want to say thanks to all of you for
thank you
to join in. Yeah. And build us with your wisdom and the knowledge and your experience. Thank you so much. Siobhan, is there anything closing that we need to hear from our Facebook family, our YouTube family, or let me just say, we are throwing it back into your hands.
There was just a lot of agreement, and Donna Greenwood is out here dropping some jewels.
Yes.
So thank you, Donna, for chiming in. I think I started with this one. She said, she agrees, we don't get a break from being oppressed. It's why hypertension and other diseases are higher in our communities.
I feel led into another whole subject now. We got
That's right. That's right. Okay.
And she also says, thank you for this important discussion today. So appreciate the perspective of each panelist. Agree with Tiffany, we must build coalitions and work together to fight voter suppression.
That's right.
Absolutely. But there were no other questions or comments out here. I'm just going to encourage everyone to share this important broadcast. We're both on Facebook and on YouTube. So don't leave it here. Make sure you share it out. We've had several discussions over the past 3 weeks around voter suppression and the two acts that we're trying to get passed in the Senate. And I think after each one, we've said we need to do this again. So be sure that we will be reaching out to all of you panelists again to have discussions like this, because I agree 150% with you all. This is something that needs to be discussed all of the time.
Yeah.
We definitely have an election coming up. We have a primary election coming up. We can't let that slip, because there are Supreme Court justices, I believe, that are on the ballot.
That's right.
Attorney generals that are on the ballot. And these are the folks that impact us from day to day. So we want to make sure our folks stay educated and we get them out there to vote. That's it for me.
I do want to say this too, and I think Minister Muhammad would say the same thing as well. If there's any way that we can help and or assist any of you in any of the groups in your work, please don't hesitate to call us. Siobhan has all my contact information. If you can reach her, you can reach me.
Thank you very much.
Yes, absolutely. I did tell Abu too, with the program he was talking with Commissioner Sabir about, to let us know about that. As soon as there's a flyer, we will post it to all of our social media to make sure our men tune in. And that is the same for all of you. And thank you, Minister Muhammad. You were awesome. I appreciate you. Abu, you were great 2 times today at the and on the panel. I can't wait to see what else you put your hands to do. And certainly, Sister Tiffany Dominique, you've been awesome the entire time. She's one of the co-workers with us to put together the National John Lewis Day of Action here in Philadelphia. She has been on task the entire time. I'm looking forward to hear more about the Black Women's Roundtable. That's definitely piqued my interest. And thank you for being an awesome speaker at the press conference and today on the panel. Thank you, Anthony Marriott, for joining in with us. Again, just make sure you guys continue to like and share. This conversation doesn't have to end here. We want to continue it. Thank you, and God bless you all.
God bless you too.
God bless. Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.